First of all, introducing our challenger. Out of the blue corner.
He's going to step in and he does. It's all over.
Let's bring on the boom.
This is Eternal MMA.
All right, everybody, welcome back and thank you for joining us here once again on another edition of Eternal Insiders, being joined once again by my co-host, Darryl Martin, here to talk once again about one of our big cards recently just gone. Eternal 83, John Martin Fraser versus Ben Johnston for the Eternal Middleweight Championship. We're here to talk about that main card, a few other bits and pieces, how the fights went down, what we saw, what we felt, and all the other things that we enjoyed in between, and a few other things that we'd like to talk about with things coming up. But please welcome in Darryl Martin. As always, Darryl, thanks for joining me here, man. Always a pleasure to talk to you. Looking forward to this one. How are things with you?
Yeah, man, really good. I'm still buzzing because what's tonight? We're Monday night. We're doing a bit of a quicker turnaround on the podcast. So, yeah, still buzzing a bit from Saturday night. It was a cracker night. I was there. Sitting cage side for a bit and sort of got around, saw a lot of people, and obviously it was a great night of fights. It was we had a bit of everything. There was knockouts, we had submissions, we had fights go the distance. It was probably one of the best matched cards that you're probably going to see. So overall it was it was a really good night of fights, and it was a good vibe in the crowd too. It was one of the better crowds I've been from the start, and there's a couple of fights, obviously, we'll talk about that sort of really helped that. But that place was jumping from the prelims all the way through to the main event. So yeah, it was a cracker night of fights and a good night for Eternal.
I didn't actually know you were there in person, but I mean, that crowd, man, I mean, we always talk about the crowd, but holy shit, like, did that start to build at a couple of points, especially with Ben Johnston coming out there in the end, a couple of crowd favourites, Taysom Malone, John Martin Fraser and everything, like, that place was rocking, man. Like, it was getting loud, like, and you can tell that from home, like, just the building was buzzing, like, that was, it looked like a good time from, like, a visual perspective and an audible perspective, like, I can't imagine.
Well, Cam said that it sold out and they had 20, 30 people waiting for tickets, and he said most of the 20 or 30 people who were waiting for tickets were TFC guys, and they had a whole section of the crowd that was just a sea of TFC and Ben Johnson shirts. And obviously when Ben won, they literally blew the top off that place.
Yeah, it was nuts. Yeah, I think they were, sold out, but then they released some extra tickets or something like that to sort of squeeze a few more people in. So, which is cool, because I think I could be completely wrong on this, but I reckon there's been some cards go by in sort of the recent past with the Southport Sharks where it hasn't necessarily been a sellout. Maybe up until at least the last second, but this one was selling out kind of really early on.
Well, visually you could see it, just like I can tell you, just being there, trying to move around in there, trying to navigate. There was people standing, people sitting, people at the bars, people in the toilet. Everywhere you went, there was seas of people, and there was lineups to get in and lineups to get out, and it was one of the better cards. And we spoke last time about the Perth card and how Perth sort of unofficially taken over as the MMA mad crowd of Australia.
Yeah,
and it's good for the Empire to strike back per se, and Queensland put on a cracker set of fights and have a crowd that was jumping from the go. And like I said, it was so packed in there. But again, it was like, Southport Sharks, it's a good venue. The air conditioning obviously is a big, super handy in that place. But it's just was something that's so busy for a fight show. It was such a well-educated crowd, a well-behaved crowd, and just such a fun crowd. They were yelling and cheering and clapping. And like I said, again, there's periods and times gone past where when fights hit the ground or got stuck on the cage, you'd hear some boos or some geniuses from the crowd yell some stupid shit. It was such an educated crowd where small transitions off the cage rather, got claps and got cheers and that's when I really was looking around like, hey, these guys all know what's going on.
Yeah, as opposed to the boos when it sort of goes to the ground, like we're just here for blood and that sort of stuff. You get that in a few places still. I think you even still get that a little bit, we talk about obviously how much we love Perth and that sort of thing, but you still get a little bit of that in Perth. Like, they get a bit thirsty for the blood and that sort of thing. So I did pick up on that that's a good thing to see, that they appreciate those little sort of finer parts of the game. So big up Queensland. Let's go Queensland.
Yeah, no, it was, like I said, it was a great crowd. And obviously that also sort of, in some of those fights when the crowd was just losing it, it really like almost fed into the fighters. Like you saw that energy pick up, and, you know, there was a couple of fights there where there was just no quit in anyone, and the crowd was really spurring them on. And it, you know, it was obviously great for the crowd, great for Eternal, great for us. It created an environment. It created fights that were fantastic. And yeah, look, like I said, it certainly was a good night for Queensland MMA.
Certainly was a good night for Queensland MMA. Of course, we had John Martin Fraser coming in to defend his title against Ben Johnston. Ultimately, Ben Johnston went on to take the belt away from John Martin Fraser. Round 2, another submission win by Ben Johnston. And we will get to that. We're going to go from the bottom of the main card up and talk about a couple little things there. But we want to give a special mention on the prelims here, because while I didn't get to see it, I know I heard all about it. I saw it on social media. I heard about it from Darryl Martin himself. We've got to give a shout out to Isaac Small versus Crane Burke, because they were the winners of the building industry training fight of the night for the prelims. There was a fight of the night on the main card, but on the prelims, hats off to Isaac Small and Crane Burke for what was apparently an absolutely insane fight, a fun fight, something that I've missed out on that I want to go back and check out later. I do like me some Isaac Small. I'm very much looking forward to seeing what he does as a mixed martial arts with his career. But you enjoyed this one, Darryl. Talk about why you like this fight. What was so good about this? What do I have to look forward to when I go check it out on YouTube?
Look, Isaac won the fight, but in all reality, there was no loser in this fight. It's hard to explain how good this fight is in terms of heart. They always say you can't teach heart, you can't buy heart, there's no supplement you can take to get heart. And both these kids had it in spades. The crowd was losing it. I was losing it. There was no quit in either of them. Both of them hit big shots on each other, and there was just no quit. And from when the bell went to when the bell rang at the end of the third round, neither of them would quit. Both of them were damaged. Both of them were hurt, and they just kept going from bell to bell. It was probably one of the more exciting fights. Don't worry about prelim fights. Don't worry about main card fights. It's probably one of the more exciting fights that I've ever watched. Now, people will say maybe the skill level is never, hey, we're not expecting that. These guys are amateur fighters in their amateur career. But you're going to tell me you've seen a more fun and a more heart shown in a fight? I don't believe it. I won't have it. That is one of the better fights that you will see. And like I said, it set the stage for the rest of the night. The crowd was already into the fight, so it was good fights previous to that. But that fight had them cheering like a main event fight. The crowd loved it, and everybody appreciated what those two kids put into that fight. And like I said, there's always got to be a winner and there's always got to be a loser. And on the scorecards, sure, there was a winner and a loser, but nobody loses out of that fight. Unfortunately, Cam had a few, Eternal had a few technical issues, and that fight wasn't shown on the stream, but it is up on YouTube. So if anyone wants to go and watch it, go and watch that fight on YouTube. That is one of the funnest fights you will see. And yeah, like I said, that's all heart. And like you said earlier, both these kids, I want to see what they do with their career, because once you add skill and experience on top of that kind of heart, the world's your oyster.
I mean, we've talked about this a few times. It seems like we mention it pretty much every time we do one of these breakdown shows, and that the prelims all the time are just so much fun. Like, we don't get a lot of downer fights or anything like that. Even in the prelims of the amateur fights, like you said, whatever you want to call them, they're just, and always sort of, all the cards start with a bang. I can't go back to too many Eternal cards in recent memory where even the first fight hasn't started with a bang, and then it just sort of trends up from there. It's really just sort of indicative of that sort of Eternal MMA, I guess, atmosphere, that sort of level of the amateur guys we've talked about in the past, like, you know, the level they're coming in with now, even with their first amateur fights, is really starting to kind of raise. So, like you said, Darryl, it's on YouTube now. Sorry, not Eternal MMA. It's on YouTube. All the fights have been uploaded to YouTube. So make sure you check out all those fights, but definitely check out that Isaac Small versus Crane Burke fight. Pardon me. The building industry training fight of the night. Sounds like an absolute cracker. I'll be doing that as soon as we finish this podcast for my little nightcap before I go to bed. So make sure you check it out, and can't wait to see what comes to those guys next. But shout out to the rest of the guys in the prelims. We didn't get to see it sort of go down because there was some of those technical issues. It happens, but sounds like it was a great prelim card nonetheless. However, we are here to talk about the main card, and as always, it was a extremely cracking main card. Couple of title fights in there. Like we said, John Martin Fraser versus Ben Johnston. Anthony Drillich defending his title for the very first time, his flyweight title, since he won that title with the vacant title that Stephen Erceg left behind. We start down the bottom of the card, though. What do we have? We open the card with an absolute cracking fight. One of the men who we infamously, maybe famously, pronounced the name wrong of last time, and we do send our apologies to Blair Bretag. I heard a couple of different pronunciations on the broadcast. I heard Blair Bretag. I heard Blair Bretag. I'm going to go with Bretag. What are you thinking? Are you Bretag?
No, I don't need to think about it anymore. I had a good conversation.
Okay.
Me and Blair covered it, and we talked about it. He did speak to his parents about legally changing his name for us, so we didn't mispronounce it, but we thought better to keep it as was, and it's Bretag. So it's of German origin,
okay.
Not Bretag.
Yes.
Bretag.
Bretag does sound very German. Okay. All right. We're going with Blair Bretag because it came from the horse's mouth himself. Blair Bretag kicked the night off. Well, he didn't kick the night off. He kicked the main card off in spectacular fashion, taking on Darcy Noonan, a former opponent of his from the Muay Thai days, but got the job done in spectacular fashion in the first round. Blair Bretag coming out of Teep Compton, so we know the striking chops and everything that come with that gym. Of course, Stephen Elliott Compton. I mean, he had Tom Nolan and everything in his corner there too. But I mean, I'd never seen Blair fight before. That was my first time. But my God, the pistons on that man. I mean, this fight being sort of set up. The story was, like I said, coming in. These guys had already fought Muay Thai back in the day. Blair himself, a lot of Muay Thai fights. I think 12 Muay Thai fights coming into this one. Noonan took the fight on a week's notice. Did come in 2 kilograms heavy from the weigh-ins. However, Blair did decide to take the fight. Good on him. But hats off to Noonan as well for jumping in there and keeping the fight on the cards with that 1 week notice fight. So we got to roll on. We got that one kicked off. But, I mean, just devastating finish right from the sort of the start. That striking from Blair. I mean, just everything, man. Those combos, the strikes. You can talk about this, but that looked insane, like everything, the hooks, like the uppercuts, like he just put it together, finished him off with that nice elbow against the cage. What a way to kick off that main card on UFC Fight Pass, man.
Yeah, look, it was a fantastic performance from Blair. And I think that it was really punctuated by the fact that he had him hurt a few times. He didn't rush in. He didn't try to crowd the plate. He didn't fall into him and end up in a clinch while he was striking. His distance management and the way he was picking those shots from the outside and really, controlling. He was the matador in that fight. Obviously, it's Noonan. He's a big kid, man. He looked like a beast in there.
He was huge, man, wasn't he? Like, look, a big old Viking. Those tattoos and everything, man. Yeah, he was jacked. Like, he's huge.
And, so, look, Blair had him hurt a few times, and it's very easy to try and get a highlight reel knockout. It's very easy to try to get in there once they're hurt and push something that's not necessarily quite there yet. But he was very good, very patient, very controlled, very disciplined striking, really picked those shots, really had him covered up and was finding those gaps around the small gloves, up the middle. I thought the referee, Nakia Melody, did a really good job there at one stage. We could hear him cage side yelling to Noonan to defend yourself. I'm going to stop it. Defend yourself. And that's when you see Noonan throws that big right hand out of with his back to the cage there. And again, that's the thing to happen. You throw that big hand, and if you're too close and you're in there trying to get that finish, it's easy to get a big right hand out of nowhere on the temple, behind the ear, somewhere where you don't see it. Next thing you know, you're waking up to a loss when, you're winning the whole fight. And look, that's a story within reason of Blair's last fight where he broke his hand. He was doing a fantastic job. He was piecing that kid up, and he copped a shot just behind the ear. One that you don't see is the one that hurts you. And that sort of ruined the rest of his night. He learnt from that. You can see he's evolved, and he didn't ever put himself in that position. He was the matador. He was controlling the pace, the distance. He was fighting the fight at his range. And yeah, look, obviously a really good finish. And, obviously hats off to Noonan for taking the fight on a week's notice. That's, and look, sure, it was a 2 kilo miss, but on a week's notice, like, what do you want? Like, what do you want? It's very hard to cut that weight, get down there. I was just happy he turned up, happy he wanted to fight and did what he could in front of a very, very good fighter in Brett Hagg.
No, happy that he got to showcase, what he's made of and what his skill set is. Like Blake Richardson said in the cage after the fight, puts the middleweight division on notice. I mean, moves to 2-1 as a professional fighter, so, still a couple of fights to him to go before he starts potentially looking at belts or anything like that. But, I mean, just on that, you just talked about, like his poise and everything, leading up to that finish with him against the cage and kind of utilising his strikes. Like we said, out of Team Compton, but how much do you think of that he sort of owes to, I guess, his Muay Thai background? Like I said, 12 Muay Thai wins. Do you think a lot of that previous experience, as a, pure striker, is that something that factors pretty heavily into, like you said, not just sort of rushing in and trying to get that calm, get that crazy finish, picking those shots sort of very well, standing sort of straight. That background, I have to assume, would, tie in very well with that Compton training, and just sort of lead to that, I guess, that perfect sort of setup to get that win.
Look, I think it does to a degree. Obviously, you get that movement, you learn that distance. Obviously, it's different in the small gloves. That distance is a little bit different, and obviously the way you can block and things like that. And your shot selection changes a little bit between big gloves and small gloves. But of course, it gives you that experience, that time in the ring. But yeah, look, like he said in his post-fight speech, he is a complete martial artist now, a complete mixed martial artist. I think it really was the mixed martial artist in there. He got him to the cage. He, again, like I said, it was really that distance management, that shot selection, but also just that discipline. It was so much discipline because he was rocked, he was hurt, he could see that, but just picking those shots, it was like sniping rather than rapid fire and it coming from everywhere. It was here, I'll work you around the side. And when your hands go out a bit, the shots started coming up the middle and it just sort of that cumulative effect. And it was so efficient too. There was no fat, there was no big swings, big wind-ups. There was nothing like that. And it really was, for me, like a really good performance in terms of the way I want to see more guys strike in MMA. More discipline, more precision, rather than someone's hurt coming in and start bowling those things. Next thing you know, you're clinched. The guy's getting a chance to recover, hold on to you, do all that type of stuff, which we saw in some of those later fights. But yeah, great fight.
It looked like a lot of faith in his technique, because I guess maybe the interpretation is, a lot of guys will try and rush those finishes, just with the big like hooks and that sort of thing. Just like, I just hit the guy as hard as I can, hopefully he's sort of going to fall. So, to me, in my interpretation of that with picking his shots is like, I know what my strikes are capable of here. Everything I'm going to throw down the middle, those uppercuts and that sort of thing. Showed a lot of discipline. He gave a lot of credit to his team, Team Compton afterwards, saying like, thank you for making me, a mixed martial artist coming in from being a Muay Thai striker, now an MMA guy, with the wrestling and that sort of thing. So hats off to Blair. Bratag, we're getting that right, Bratag, with the German pronunciation. Let's see what he rolls on to next. But hell of a win in Eternal MMA to kick off that main card. We had a few performances of the night. Bonuses get handed out. One of the first ones of those was Mitsuho Matsuyama. He came in as a 1-4 professional fighter. Not entirely indicative of his record there, but definitely needed a win coming in against Jack Hayes, fighting out of M16 Fight and Fitness, getting the TKO win in round one with a perfectly placed liver shot there to finish the night, earning himself a performance of the night bonus in the run there as well. You can talk a little bit about the fight, sort of how that sort of played out there a little bit, but a lot of low kicks and everything early. Range advantage, obviously, in the way of Matsuyama. Both strikes, both guys looking to get their strikes off. Pretty calculated up until the point of that finish. But, I mean, watching that fight back a couple of times, it took me a second to see how that strike actually caught him nicely on the liver there and dropped him. It was so quick, but definitely a good reason why he sort of earned himself a performance of the night bonus. Hats off to Matsuyama. That was a hell of a finish, backing up an incredible finish that we had before that fight.
Yeah, look, good fight from both guys. And again, sure, it got finished, but that was an even fight. Both guys were giving as good as they got, but it was a really good strategic performance from Matsuyama. I really felt like he was looking for that body shot, and it's a good fight for a lot of the younger fighters to look to watch out there. You just don't headhunt. You know that body's there, and that's what happens if you land and we've seen in the last couple of Eternal events a couple of fantastic body shots that have dropped and finished the fight. You know what I mean? And you see sometimes guys get so caught up in headhunting, they forget that the body's there. And it's a lot of the time it's wide open when they're, they're handcuffed, their hands are right up the top like that, preventing multiple strikes to the head. And that body's there. And Matsuyama did a fantastic job of exploiting that. And I felt like it was a part of their plan. And he sort of really led him into that shot, got him where he wanted to get him, stepped through, and a beautiful shot to the liver. And another, I thought another good piece of refereeing, Claire in this case, she gave the fighter Jack Hayes?
Jack Hayes, yeah.
Jack Hayes. She gave Jack plenty of opportunity because he obviously dropped, covered up, and she gave him plenty of instruction to improve his position, fight back. He didn't do it. But again, like I said, the referees here in Queensland, we're just so lucky because if you had jumped in and stopped that fight immediately when the body shot hit and he went to the ground, we would be sitting here today talking about what ifs, maybe what would have happened. But instead, they let it go just that little bit longer. I don't think he copped any additional damage than he needed to. He was pretty covered up on the ground. A lot of those strikes hit the forearms and stuff, but he obviously didn't improve his position. He didn't do anything the referee asked him to do, so the fight was stopped. So good fight, good piece of refereeing, and obviously a fantastic result and one that he needed from Matsuyama.
Did that look like it was clean on the liver to you? Like when I first saw it, I thought maybe it was just like a body strike and kind of winded him. But, you've talked about this before about what a liver shot feels like. I don't know what that feels like, and I don't ever plan on finding out. But, I mean, you talk about, obviously you said a good finish, gave him every opportunity. But, you catch him on the button on that liver. There's not a lot of coming back from that, from how you feel. Apparently, you're just going to feel sick. You get your whole body sort of shuts down. So, did you think that sort of caught him directly on the liver? Like he wasn't getting out of that position, was he?
It could have been a rib, could have got a floating rib, could have got the liver. Hard to tell. Whatever it got, it worked because that instant reaction from him. And look, he'd been hit a bit already by Matsuyama, and he's a tough kid. And like I said, he was giving as good as he got. Up until that point, it was very even Stevens fight, and I was enjoying it. And obviously, I certainly enjoyed the finish and. But yeah, look, it did what it needed to do. Wherever it got there, it was hard for me to see. I've had to look from a few different angles to see exactly how it landed. But yeah, floating rib, liver, whichever it got the desired result. And fantastic finish. And he's a very infectious young kid, Matsuyama. And
sure
he was up the cage one side, up the cage the other side, and he has a really big backing there in the crowd, he's a crowd favorite. They were chanting and screaming for him, and it was good. Obviously, you could almost see in that post-fight speech and that weight of the world had been lifted off his shoulders, and you could see the exuberance and the happiness. And when he came downstairs after the fight or out the back for his interview and stuff, he was very, very happy and very jovial. And yeah, it was good to see him back in the winners column.
Yeah, I mean, training at a CMBT, right? So those guys are always very well represented. When Eternal is fighting in the Gold Coast, so he's a Japanese national, I believe he is. Obviously over here now training full time with CMBT. A lot of good guys there, a lot of good training partners, a lot of good coaches and that sort of thing. So good on him. Seems like he settled in pretty well. I was pretty surprised just from Jack Hayes' point of view. Like, sort of the book on him was he was a 2019-2020 state wrestling champion. Training out of Adelaide under Miles Simpson, former Eternal champion. Didn't really sort of look for the wrestling early. Looked to put a bit of faith in his striking. But, from my perspective, just sort of looking at, I guess, Matsuyama's range and, what he sort of looked like he had in terms of the striking advantage, I'm surprised he didn't sort of look for the grappling early and look to assert himself in that regard because, being a sort of a former state wrestling champion, you'd think you could sort of nullify that sort of part of the game early. Maybe just sort of something for him to lean on going forward. But surprised he didn't go to that wrestling. He didn't really go to it at all, but surprised it wasn't something that he gave himself the opportunity to lean on early.
Yeah, look, if I'm being honest, I think he was just settling into the fight. he looked very comfortable in there. He looked very calm, composed, and controlled in there. And I think he was trying to get his reads on Matsuyama.
Sure.
And it's just, it's one of those things where sometimes that is the perfect game plan, and you get your timing, get your reads, start picking your shots, and the level change comes, and you start picking up those takedowns. But yeah, Matsuyama had his own plans, and that body shot was a part of them. And again, it's something that it's not super common, especially in MMA. The body shots just aren't super common, and he exploited that. And yeah, like I said, it only takes one, and it's not like a headshot that you can clinch up and shake off. It's not that feeling. And you saw him on the ground, that instant crunch up, try to get air into your body, try to defend yourself. It's a instant fetal position response. And yeah, look, obviously going back, he'll probably have a look at that, and maybe look at implementing at least some threatening of level changes, maybe at least having conscious of the takedown. Maybe he'll do that earlier in the fight, but I don't necessarily think he did something wrong or bad. I think he looked very comfortable in there right up to the point where he got that liver shot.
Sure. Take nothing away from Matsuyama earning himself a performance of the night bonus. The first one on the main card, we may as well riff off what the Fight HQ performance of the night bonuses were, and we'll get to those with each fight. But we do go back to the prelim card with Dom Aston winning submission of the night. Of course, we just mentioned Matsuyama winning the performance of the night. We did have Taser Malone and Ethan Mitchell, which we'll talk about very shortly, coming up for the fight of the night. A cracking fight that was. KO of the night to Anthony Drillich with that mean KO that he had in the flyweight fight. We're going to talk about that and more once we sort of get to that. Of course, we do have a couple of fights to talk about before we do get to those. But worth mentioning, Fight HQ coming on. I mean, you were there cage side, you were there backstage. You probably got to see a bit of a first-hand look about, Fight HQ coming on board, that new partnership agreement with Eternal MMA, providing some fight apparel, providing some fight wear for the Eternal MMA fighters. Australia's largest provider of MMA fight kits, if I'm not mistaken. So very cool partnership there. Sounds like it's a great thing going forward, but also sponsoring the performance of the night bonuses. Fight HQ partnering up with Eternal MMA. Did you get to see some of that backstage? I think there's a bit of a setup and everything with the guys back there from Nick Adkins, I believe it is, the former IBF Muay Thai world champion. Seems like a good thing going forward with the fighters getting set up with that fight gear.
Yeah, look, the Fight HQ partnership is obviously fantastic for Eternal as a brand, and fantastic for the fighters. I mean, already we're seeing sort of a big contribution from Fight HQ to the participants in Eternal, and their gear is top level. Their service is amazing. We've already purchased a few things through Fight HQ, and look, it's a massive thing for Eternal to get Fight HQ on board. Like, just to have somebody who's selling gear of that quality at that volume, and to enter into MMA, because obviously Nick Atkins is well-versed, well-known in the Muay Thai space, and now he's moving out into the MMA space. And obviously a smart move from Fight HQ to come to Eternal, the biggest and best show in Australia right now. And, obviously it's good for both brands will feed off each other. But yeah, again, I guess a shout out to Cam. He continues to foster these relationships and build Eternal and build the fight experience for each fighter. Now, each time the fighter comes, they get a Fight HQ kit that comes with them.
Yeah, cool.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
There's gift cards, there's bags, there's all sorts of things. And, it's not just you come and fight anymore. Eternal, Fight HQ, and Cam, they're starting to provide a whole experience for the fighter. Do you know what I mean? We're giving back to the fighter, creating something. We're trying to raise the profile of these fighters, of the gyms, of Eternal, and now obviously of Fight HQ. And it's a symbiotic relationship here. And it's one of those things where it's, we're starting to take some of these cues from some of the bigger organizations and implement them here on a regional scene. And, it's working. You know what I mean? It's working. We're starting to, what do they say? When the water raises, all boats rise. That's what we're seeing. You know what I mean? No one getting left behind. Cam didn't just take sponsorship money and stick it in his back pocket. That's not what happened here. Fight HQ were very forward. about wanting to help the fighters, wanting to be on board, not just with the brand of Eternal, but be on board with the fighters. So I think it's, obviously it's good for everybody. And again, all boats rise. The fighters get something out of it. Eternal gets something out of it. Fight HQ gets something out of it. And look, you've got two guys, Cam and Nick Atkins. They've been around for a long time. They're, old heads in the business and in the scene of combat sports. So it's people who've done it, who've run it. It's not, do you know what I mean? It's not people who just are hobbyists or outsiders. These people understand the sport. They understand what goes into it, and they understand how hard it can be to be a fighter on a budget. And all this stuff helps all of the above. And it's it's a fantastic partnership, and it's a really big move for Eternal.
No, shout out Fight HQ, shout out Nick Adkins. Seems like a hell of a partnership. We're all for the fighters getting taken care of in any sort of way possible. So that's a really cool thing. Very cool partnership announcement. Very cool to sort of see what was going on backstage with, as you said, guys getting their bags and all that sort of fight kits and all that sort of thing. So, hey, send me something this way, Fight HQ. Not a fighter, but I'll rep your stuff here. We'll get something going. I'll shout it out anytime. But also shout out to the fighters that get sponsored for those Fight HQ bonuses there too. So, good partnership all around. So we move on to Gabriel Schlupp versus Brogan Anderson. Gabriel Schlupp out of Tribal MMA, originally out of Brazil, coming in as a 5-0 fighter. What a cracker of a fight this was. Maybe unlucky to not get the fight of the night, but we did have some fantastic fights of the night. This was just one of them. I mean, you look at Schlupp coming in from Brazil. He was himself formerly, I believe, a Muay Thai fighter, potentially undefeated there, but also a credentialed boxer and that sort of thing. Looked like a credentialed striker all around. He's a Brazilian jiu-jitsu black belt as well, I believe. So coming with a lot of good chops. There's sort of a sneaky, good record there coming in 5-0. Did get the win over Brogan Stewart. Brogan Stewart himself, great chops as far as his credentials as well. Coming in as a former collegiate wrestler. Spent a lot of time in places overseas, training in Thailand, training in places like Netherlands, Russia. So total student of the game. And we just reaped the benefits of that, seeing two guys that have sort of been there and done that, pitting their skills against each other. I mean, each round was sort of, it was sort of different and the same in kind of each round. Just it had everything you kind of wanted, on the feet, on the ground. We got so much. We got two guys that wouldn't sort of back down an inch from each other. Ultimately, Gabriel Schlupp coming out on top. Hell of a fight. You were obviously there to sort of see it cage side. What did you see? Talk us through that because we got a hell of a fight through round 1, round 2, and round 3. Super entertaining for me, fight of the night, but I mean, take nothing away from those other fights. This fight, though, was an absolute cracker, man.
Look, it was another one of those fights where you got 3 rounds of action where the crowd barely sat down for 1 minute of the fight. There was so much to see, so much action, so much back and forth, great striking. We saw groundwork, we saw cage work. Again, we saw mixed martial arts through its entire spectrum. And like you said, definitely contender for fight of the night. Probably didn't see the wrestling I was expecting to see from Stewart. I expected to see, him use that a little bit more, maybe use that in the setups and stuff. A lot of heart from the kid. He continued to walk forward in the face of getting struck a bit. And, it's one of those things. It's just a personal pet peeve of mine. Stewart was getting hit and he's like putting his hands up like big deal, big deal. And I get it. Like you're a very, very tough kid. You're a very strong kid. But you're getting hit and putting your hands up like big deal. But every time you get hit and you put your hands up, that's a point. You've been hit and you haven't answered it in the judge's eyes. And I really think the fight was a very, very close fight. And I just wanted to see a little bit more urgency from Stewart. I just, I get it. Like you're trying to impose your will. You're letting him know, hey, your strikes aren't hurting me. I don't care. I'm just going to keep walking forward. And he was like the Terminator. He just kept coming all night. And I think maybe if he could, maybe mix in a little bit more of that wrestling, that collegiate wrestling background. And again, like I said, I don't want to tell people how to fight, but like I said, it doesn't do anything for the judges. And I would have liked to see a little bit less of that and a little bit, hey man, you're walking him down, you're pressuring him, you're not taking the foot off the gas at all. Just keep going. Just keep coming at him. Keep, rather than this, let's see some more of this. I want to see more action, less letting the fighter know that you didn't hurt him, because he didn't appear to care that he wasn't hurting you. He kept hitting you. But like I said, take nothing away from Stewart at the same time. Good fight, Terminator attitude, kept coming at him, but Schlupp was just, I think, just in the end, I think he just was a bit much, and the takedowns and the little bit of ground control that there was, I think, probably swayed the judges in his direction. But hit Schlupp too, he did a fantastic job. Like, that jab was working. He was pinpoint accurate with those shots. Again, he wasn't overextending, and I'm guessing, knowing the collegiate wrestling background of Stewart, you didn't see him really, really reach in for shots to do anything. He kept his balance. He kept his distance. The boys at Tribal had obviously prepared him really, really well for that. I'm pretty sure I saw Connor Birch there in the corner. Connor's been around forever and, obviously a very good competitor himself. And I think they prepared him really, really well for that fight, because he stayed in his pocket, in his range. He took the takedowns when they suited him, and he racked up that ground time. But, like I said, close fight, good fight, great fight for the crowd. And, I think there's more in Stewart. I think he's a very good fighter. I think there's a little bit more in there. And I think if we could keep him a little bit more on point in the fight. And I heard his corner yelling a variety of things to him, but I think he was just so in the zone of what he was doing. Yeah. He didn't necessarily listen to everything that was being yelled from his corner. And look, that's just something that comes with time and experience. And, you get used to hearing your corners and stuff. And, look, like I said, in time, more experience there, listen to your corner, and a little, like I said, you do what you want to do, but a little less of this, a little more action, because look, you were putting it on him. Your gas tank was there. You look like you had more to give. I would like to see you push him just a little bit more and maybe break him.
Do you think that was sort of a factor? Because especially in that kind of third round, he really looked like he just tried to, I guess, push the sort of the point, consistently walk him down. I sort of was getting the impression that he was hoping that it was kind of going to wilt Schlupp a little bit by just constantly coming forward, like constantly sort of trying to weaponize that pace. I mean, he had a lot of really good moments with the leg kicks, the body kicks, and that sort of thing. Like, his kicks look like a massive weapon for him. But it just sort of seemed like he was trying to wear him down as that sort of too much. And Schlupp, for all intents and purposes, had the gas tank to match it. Stewart was kind of walking onto his strikes a little bit too much, and he was able to sort of use the counter, sort of a lot of that with him trying to weaponize that pace a little bit. Do you think sort of, maybe for his fights going forward, obviously you said he can kind of lean on the wrestling a little bit, but, is it sort of something that, maybe he doesn't have to sort of use that tactic and just trying to walk the bloke down? Is there something that he can kind of find by just sort of waiting, maybe, with his leg kicks, he can fight off the counter a little bit? Do you think that's sort of something that maybe he takes from his next fight? Hey, I don't have to try and walk this guy down. Hey, I don't have to try and run them over. I can try to wait for them to sort of come to me a little bit and maybe, fight a little bit more tactically, if that sort of makes sense.
Yeah, no, look, I definitely see what you're saying, and it's definitely an option for him. I guess it comes down to, who he is as a fighter and, what his ethos is in terms of what he likes to do and what makes him feel comfortable in the cage. He looked very comfortable walking him down. Obviously, he ended up on the receiving end of too much of the counter. I think he just stayed a little bit outside of what he sort of wasn't in and he wasn't out, if that makes sense. He sort of stood just on the edge of Schlupp's striking range, and every time he stepped in, he sort of got countered rather than being all the way in and making it a bit dirtier, or sort of be on the outside and make Schlupp have to close the distance to him. But yeah, look, to your point, it's definitely something for him to look at. Like you said, the kicks were great. The cardio was great. The intensity was great. Now it's just maybe, like I said, gaming the system. The game plan maybe has to be just tightened up a little bit. And like I said, I could hear his corner yelling instructions. I liked what his corner was yelling, but I don't necessarily think he was following exactly what the corner was asking for, because I do believe the corner was giving him the right instructions, especially in that third round, to try and snatch that third round.
Well, we take nothing away from Gabriel Schlupp. I mean, like we said, he came in as a 5-0 fighter. His first fight in about 3.5 years in MMA at least, moves to 6-0. So if Gabriel Schlupp wants to stick around, I mean, he called his shot for the featherweight title. So, I mean, hey, let's put our hands up for that one, depending on, what our resident champion, Justin Van Heerden, has plans for in the future. But he's definitely one to watch, a very exciting fighter. So if we get to see him back, sorry, I've got the fans are on here and it's bloody kicking the freaking dust around here like bloody crazy. I'm trying to get something.
I thought you'd been hanging out with Craig Jones again.
No,
what's going on
you know
here?
what's funny about that is I'm so cognizant of this because I'm straying off track here. But the one time that I try to do a breakdown video back in the day when I was sort of doing my own thing in this friggin' room, like I get fucking fluff floating around here. This is not a Craig Jones experiment going on here. This is just because I've got a fan under me here, a fan above me here because it's fucking cooking in this room right now. And there's dust and shit getting in my nose. But I'm very cognizant of what this looks like on camera. And it ain't that. So don't get any ideas. My eyes aren't friggin' like blowing up here. So this is dust related, people. Okay, I've got a dust allergy, goddammit. So if I'm doing that for the rest of the pod, just ignore that. We can move past it, all right? We move past it. We move to
just so everyone knows, Luke's just allergic to Colombian dust.
Luke's allergic to Colombian dust. Yeah, we might clip that and put it on the Instagram for the for the promo for this one. So just let me try and take care of this a little bit here. Just fucking get it in my nose, pissing me off. I'm gonna do it the whole friggin' time. Anyway, it is what it is. We certainly move on. That was a hell of a fight. Gabriel Schlupp. Let's see what he does next. Maybe it's a shot at the featherweight title. Whatever it is, let's just see him back in an Eternal MMA cage because hell of an entertaining fighter there out of Tribal MMA. We did have one of Queensland's favourite sons, one of the Gold Coast favourite sons, coming in for his third professional fight. We're talking, of course, about Taser Malone. Taser Malone coming in against Ethan Mitchell, late notice replacement. Was supposed to be fighting against Jaden Binney. But Ethan Mitchell out of Team Compton, well represented there, making his professional debut. This was another cracker fight. This ended up winning the Fight HQ Fight of the Night. Definitely well deserving there. Both of those fighters represented themselves very well. It was one of those kind of fights. We talked about this sort of the night before in terms of, one of the scorecards there was a 30-27 in the way of Taser Malone. That probably wasn't sort of the right thing. I actually went and watched the fight back a little bit. I think ultimately at the end of the day, I don't even know. Like, I want to say, I think Taser, it really just sort of comes down to like what the judges kind of favored in that fight because clearly the damage was in favor of Ethan Mitchell. Ethan Mitchell, man, what a gamer in his professional debut there up against Taser Malone, the machine for a reason. But I think, we talked about this. I talked about sort of the output. What I was kind of getting at was sort of more just the output physically, not necessarily the striking because as you said, like Mitchell outstruck him in terms, if you look at the striking percentages, I think Taser had the slightly better landing percentage, but Ethan had the volume there. Obviously, the big moment in the fight was Ethan Mitchell cracking him with that knee. Another one of those ones where you got to replay it and see it happen because if you don't friggin' see it the first time, you don't bloody see it again unless you do go back and watch it. But just, Taser coming to that big hook that he missed and then just that sweet friggin' knee up the middle there from Ethan Mitchell. But, I mean, ultimately, in the end, Taser does get the job done. And I think it really just came down to the fact that Taser wore on him. I guess the optics of Taser, spending most of the fight pressing him against the cage, wearing him down with the grappling, using his strikes to kind of set up his takedown attempts. Credit to Ethan Mitchell. I mean, he got out of so many of those takedowns. I think Taser in the end was credited with 7 takedowns. I'm curious to get your thoughts on that because I've heard Daniel Cormier say a lot about more mat returns as opposed to takedowns because I don't recall seeing 7 direct takedowns on Ethan Mitchell. He defended those quite well. But it was a hell of an entertaining fight. Taser goes home with a well-adjusted face. I think Bones there in the commentary booth, the booth referred to it as a bit of a drop pie sort of look there for Taser Malone. But hats off to both of those boys. Incredible fight. Well done to Taser Malone, moving to 3-0 now as a featherweight. But your thoughts on how that one played out, your thoughts on the 30-27s, your thoughts on the fight overall and how it was scored.
Okay, so I'll try and address this point by point. So I watched the fight twice since that night. I watched it with commentary and I watched it without commentary. I scored for Ethan Mitchell. Okay. I thought Ethan Mitchell won the fight.
Yep.
And look, I understand
since you watched it or initially when you first saw it?
Initially, I thought it was Ethan, and since I've watched it, I still think it's Ethan.
Okay.
With that said, I can see, again, it's one of those fights where it's more what the judge likes and takes into account. That cage control, are you big into that? Do you think that's adding up? The ground time, like, it didn't really seem to. He didn't. Taser didn't do a bunch with it. Ethan didn't really get, didn't get pounded on. Didn't get, there wasn't really any close submissions or anything like that. The 30-27. Whoever that judge is, I'm happy for him to be put in a Chinese re-education camp because to give that 30-27, you straight away should get a sponsorship from Specsavers. That's a howler. That is one of the worst judging decisions. And look, we're usually blessed with fantastic judging here in Queensland, and we always give, some of the other judging in other places a hard time, but you got to keep it 100% when it's bad here. Like you said it, I've said it. I didn't meet a person in the arena that night or since who thinks it was a 30-27 round. I don't know what he watched. The round where he busted his face up, had him wobbled twice. He outscored him in both volume and significant strikes. How he didn't get that round, outside of pulling out a gun and shooting Taser, and I think even then he probably would have given it to the other guy. I think when you're giving a 30-27.
What do you think was the obvious round for Mitchell? Do you remember what you think? Obviously, it was given as a 29-28. I personally thought after, this was one of the fights that you get to watch back, I think it was the first round for me personally that you would give to Mitchell, and I think it was a couple of the other judges that did give it 29-28. They did give it the first round, but I wasn't sort of that in the zone at the time. Watching it back, to me, he had the first round at the very least.
Yeah, I think it's, like I said, it's obvious that's the round that I think if you looked at the scorecards, that's the round everyone gave to him. Yeah. I think that's and then it's the debate about
the rest of them, yeah.
The debate about the others.
Yeah.
And again, it's what do you like? Look, I thought Ethan did enough. I would have liked to see maybe just a little bit of more urgency in that third round. I would have liked to see, but again, take nothing away from Taser Malone. Taser Malone was clearly damaged, clearly impaired.
Yeah.
That eye swelling up, he would have been able to see, if he could see it all out of that eye, he would have been seeing the top and the bottom of that eye. It would have been very, very difficult to see strikes coming, to again gauge distance, because once your vision's impaired, you're no longer seeing the way you would see normally. So being able to gauge distance, takedowns, all that type of stuff, it changes the whole dynamics of that thing. And to stay in the fight, to not look for a way out when you're that damaged, hats off to Taser. Taser kept pushing forward, which I think in the eyes of the judges is what swung it his way. And I think that's what they saw. They saw Taser consistently, even though he was injured, even though he was copying those big kicks and punches and combinations, he kept moving forward. He was getting that control time. He got those takedowns. He got those mat returns. And I think in the end, that's what swayed the judges. I would have been happy to see it go to Ethan. Obviously, like I said, I scored it that way. I've talked to a lot of other people who scored it for Taser as well. And I think it just comes down. It's one of those unfortunate fights where there's no clear winner in terms of, it's just what you like and what the only three people who count in the whole stadium like when they're watching at MMA. The 30-27, I don't even take that as a real score. That's not even a real score. The other two people both had it right, 29-28. Which way you saw it, that's a toss-up. I would have said Ethan. Happy for Taser to get it. I see the argument for it. But just my experience, my thought, me seeing it, me rewatching it, I thought he did enough to snatch it. But if anything, maybe a little bit of more urgency in round 3 to really put a stamp on it.
Yeah, Jimmy, obviously in the end, and this sort of surprised me, and I guess I noticed it going back and watching the fight for a second time, but, the strikes, as far as the cumulative strikes, weighed in favor of Ethan. Was it sort of a matter of, I guess, if he kind of, wasn't sort of pressed up on the cage by Taser as much, if he'd sort of had those opportunities to maybe just get off a little bit more, and from like an optical perspective, a little bit more in sort of the center of the cage and that sort of thing, that would have gone more of his favor. And it just was kind of that, I guess, overwhelming dominant pressure, I guess, from Taser is kind of what was sort of favored. Because I guess, if thinking about it for myself, you watch that sort of the fight the first time and I initially think Taser, and then go back and watch it as sort of a second time and I still kind of think Taser, but leaning more towards Mitchell. The memorable, I guess, part of the fight was obviously the knee and that damage, but from start to finish, the memorable part from me, and maybe it's what sort of the judges are thinking, is just that optics of Taser sort of just kind of pushing that action, pushing him against the cage and that sort of thing. And I guess Ethan kind of looking like, he's backing up a little bit and trying to sort of push his fights. I guess it kind of came down to, it looked like Taser was more, maybe seemed more dominant, he was just generally dominating the fight. Is that kind of probably what it comes down to for the judges?
Well, look, it's always any fighter that's continually pressing forward, kind of looks like he's pushing the pace, pushing the action. I really thought Ethan was countering really well. I think he did great work not to be taken down off the cage as many times. I think he did good jobs getting up. But yeah, like you said, it's that constant forward pressure from Taser, which I think stuck in the judges' minds. And that's why I was saying in that third round, I would have liked to see Ethan maybe just a little bit more urgency. Yep. I felt like, watching him after the fight, he seemed to still have a little bit of gas left. I would like to see him try to empty that tank. But look,
hey, pro debut, by the way, too. Like, against a guy like Taser Malone.
What a fantastic position to be in.
Yeah.
Where the fight is so good and so close, we're arguing over who won.
Yep.
I mean? And that's, again, it was one of those fights where the whole crowd was jumping. At the end of it, when they were about to read it out, you could have heard a pin drop because nobody knew which way it was going to go. And again, just for a fight that was matched on short notice, it's just a cracker fight, just an amazing fight to get that kind of fight out of a short notice, a short run up for Ethan Mitchell. And obviously, him going forward from this point, it's, with a proper camp ready, a game plan for a particular fighter, he's obviously one to look out for. But yeah, great fight. And, I think it's a privilege for us to be sitting here. It's such a good fight. They were arguing, no Mitchell, no Taser, no Mitchell. It's, that's how good a fight it was. And it's a credit to both the guys and take nothing away from either of them. But I won't lie, a little bit selfish on my behalf, but I do want to see them run it back at some stage. I'd love to see them both prepare for each other and have another crack at each other. I think it would make for a stellar fight.
Let's see what happens later down the line, maybe with some potential silverware somewhere down there at some point. Obviously, that's early days right now. But, I mean, for those people that haven't seen what Taser Malone looked like, I mean, what an absolute trooper there. I don't know if you can see that properly on the camera, but, I mean, look at the man's eye, for God's sake. Like, that was from that swift knee. I mean, as soon as you get a chance, go back and watch that on UFC Fight Pass and see where you can sort of pick it. I guarantee if you don't know, if you haven't seen it, you won't pick it straight away. You'll see at some point that he's wearing some damage on your face, but you're going to have to rewind back a couple of seconds to see where it happens because that knee might.
And you have to remember, Taser fought a good percentage of the fight with his eye.
Look at that close, man. You see those like shots when he's up on the cage, like the camera's hard in on him, and he's just like he's on Ethan's back and he's trying to take him down. Ethan's just like he's tall and sort of lanky and just sort of hard to pull to the ground, and he's just grinding on him. You can just tell you can tell he's starting to feel it, and you can tell he's in sort of a bit of pain at that point. He
copped a few of those back elbows when he was
did.
Back there too.
Yeah, that just would have compounded that pain like so much more. So I mean, we give the credit to Ethan Mitchell in his pro debut, but you still got to give your hats off to Taser Malone for walking through that adversity, taking that massive knee up the middle there, and just busting his face wide open. Happy that the ref didn't call it off. I was praying that please just be. Can we please just see the whites of his eyes a little bit when they go in there with the cold touch and that sort of thing? And thank God you could just see his vision there a little bit and the fight gets to go on because it would have been a shame if it got stopped. Because, obviously those guys got their performance of the night bonus for that fight from Fight HQ. So,
again, look, it's like I said, all night, maybe not the judging. There was a couple of bits of judging during the night, which I thought old Cecil Peoples or Adelaide Bird had snuck into the arena and taken over the judging table.
Oh, fuck Adelaide Bird, man. God damn. That's a name I haven't heard in a little bit, but I mean, probably not long enough to be fair.
But the refereeing on the night, and again, they took a good look at his eye. They kept a good eye on his eye. And, it would have been a shame to stop him from going out on his shield like that. And he was able to fight on and to get the win. And again, like I said, there's a very, very fine line between adjudicating a fight competently and incompetently getting somebody hurt. And like I said, luckily here in Queensland, I think we've got the best referees in Australia. Pete Hickmott does a lot of work with the refs. We've got a lot of referees that are experienced and we've got guys coming through. And I think all night tonight, like I said, I think Claire did a great job early on. Keir Melody did a great job in the Bretagne fight. And I think in this fight, it would have been a shame to see that fight stopped and us not to get the rest of that fantastic fight and to prevent Taser from picking up yet another W. So, obviously hats off to the fighters, but again, another fantastic performance from the referee team. And I don't think people understand. One decision, one thing can really, really change the trajectory of a career. Like a loss, a finish like that and a loss can really take the heart out of somebody. You know what I mean? So to have somebody competent and confident in the ring to go, hey, I'm going to give you every opportunity to win this fight or at least be in this fight. But at the same time, I'm going to keep an eye on you enough to make sure you don't get hurt. So I think that was a perfect blend in that fight. And, another shout out to the guys who do the refereeing here. And it's a testament to Eternal of that. Like I said, we're not using, Uncle Greg from out of the crowd to referee. We're using guys who are looking after you. They're sanctioned referees. They go through courses to be referees. They don't just walk out one day and become referees. They start out the back signing off gloves, starters, timekeepers, starters, all that. They have to pay their dues to get up there. And, like I said, if you're a fighter and you're looking at fighting somewhere, you want to fight somewhere where these type of referees are refereeing to look after you and to look after your career.
No, it's a good thing too because, I talked to Taser before the fight and, of course, we had, the laid bare and everything promotion for Taser. Like, Taser is an Eternal MMA guy through and through. And, of course, we're not, we're impartial here. We want to see good fights. Whoever gets the win, they deserve the win. We're not necessarily pulling for anyone in particular, but, it's hard not to be happy for a guy like Taser Malone that's fought, 12 fights now for Eternal MMA, most of that obviously being his amateur career. All of those fights for his amateur career were with Eternal MMA bar one. So, it's cool to sort of see him get those wins and kind of add to that early legacy, especially when you kind of talk about, everything that he's sort of done to commit himself to the game, from everything from, parking the van outside of CMBT, so he can be there for his training, where all his resources are, not, spending the money in the clubs and that sort of thing. Like, he's devoted absolutely everything to becoming a professional, made a lot of sacrifices and everything along the way. Now, we talked a little bit about this on the pod with Taser and may mention that I think some people think that's what every single MMA fighter does, and at this level, it's just not the case. Like, there's some people that are in it because it's fun. There are some people that do it but don't quite really want to make the sacrifice. They want to commit to everything. And then there's Taser Malone that's going to live in his van at the front, give up absolutely everything. You look at the man, he's in shape, like he's shredded, like he's a natural athlete. He comes from that Aussie rules background. His sister, Rosie Malone, a hockey roo, a medalist at the Olympics, Commonwealth Games. Like, it's in their blood. They've got that sporting mentality. They've got that drive. I love everything about Taser Malone, not just from the sports competitive side of things as well, but how he talks on camera and everything too. Like, he talks fast in the cage, but outside of it, everything he talks about is so well thought out. He doesn't say things just to say things, you know what I mean? Like, he's got a very clear idea about what he wants from his career. He thinks about everything. He's very cerebral about what he kind of talks about. And I think it's going to serve him very sort of well going forward. Absolute pleasure to have him on the podcast, when I had him here for the first time. I can't wait to have him back on because he's just such an interesting bloke, without trying to be. And, you root for guys like that. So hats off for Taser Malone moving to 3-0. Continue that legacy, continue the build up. Can't wait to see him back now that he's fighting at a featherweight. Now that he's fighting down at featherweight. Good things in his future. Get rested up, Taser. Heal that orbital bone, heal the nose and everything, whatever it might be. And Ethan Mitchell, hell of a performance for you too, brother, in your debut there professionally fighting at Team Compton. So very much hats off for both of those boys. We had that fight just before we saw two former Eternal lightweight champions going at it. We had Josh Togo winning via split decision against also former champion in Jack Becker. That was a fight we're all very much looking forward to. I think someone said on the commentary team that Cam O'Neill was about to have a heart attack there beside the cage because he was so wound up and so prepared for this fight. But, we had Josh Togo ultimately coming out on top. Did just sort of run away with the fight there in the end there. Jack sort of coming forward. But, Josh just sort of looked pretty good with the boxing and everything there towards the end. Those first sort of couple of rounds were sort of, so-so. But I think, from my perspective, Josh really kind of ran away with it with the boxing side of things there. But, Josh Togo himself, former guy, former champion, made his debut back at Eternal 28, won the belt, ultimately lost it to Dan Hill at Eternal 61. And that's where... Jack Becker went and claimed it off Dan Hill himself there going forward, and then ultimately lost that belt with that devastating injury to Aiden Aguilera when he broke his leg, but came back, got back on the horse, got himself back in the win column, and that gets us a matchup between two former lightweight champions, and we got to see that all play out. But Josh Togo, what a guy, got a great win there. Jack, he'll be back no doubt, but Josh Togo rolls on. What did you think of this one? It was a split decision. Did you think there was a clear winner there? It was, for me, I thought Josh won, but it was a pretty close fight all around.
Yeah, look, again, I'm not sure who gave it to Jack Becker. I'm assuming it's the same person who gave 30-27 to Taser. I'm assuming it's the same culprit. But look, you're right. He did run away with it in the boxing in the end, and Jack Becker's sort of beard turned to Velcro. Everything that Josh Togo threw stuck. He wobbled him multiple times. Again, a very, very disciplined performance from Josh Togo. Really didn't overextend. Just kept shooting those shots up the pipe. He's sort of that 1-2-1. It was a very, very good performance, and to, stay off the ground and to stay at range, control that distance. And, it wasn't a fight where he didn't have any adversity. Jack Becker is obviously a seasoned veteran, a former champion, a very, very good fighter in his own right. Does he look like the animal that was there before he broke his leg? Unfortunately, like I said, we try to keep it 100 whenever we can, and he doesn't. He doesn't look exactly like the Jack Becker who went into that cage that night before he broke his leg. He's still, obviously, the skills are there. I don't know. It's just something that doesn't look.
He looked a little off in the pace to me. I don't know what it was. I don't know if he was unsure, but I mean, looking back at his past fights, just everything seemed a little sharp, with his kicks and all that sort of thing, with his strikes. To me, I don't know if this was just sort of something on the night, but to me, he just looked just that little, like just 10% off the sharpness of what we're sort of used to sort of seeing him. You know what I mean? That was sort of what I kind of saw. Obviously, he sort of had his moments, with the takedowns and that sort of thing. But to me, just, that little bit of extra kind of pop, I guess, just that little bit of twitch that I've sort of normally seen from the past just wasn't quite there.
I agree 100%. It just, like I said, and just maybe some of his shot selections, setups and things like that. Just, I'm used to seeing him fight with, I thought, I don't really think it was a really big fight, a high IQ fight from him, if that makes sense. I just think I've seen him fight better. I think I've seen him make better shot selections, better game plans, better ideas. It just didn't go together for him on the night. And look, take nothing away from Josh Togo. Josh stuck to a very linear plan, and we saw it round after round after round. This is what I'm doing. The boys down there with Suman Mokhtar and them had him very, very well prepared. Suman, who now, I don't know if you saw him at cage side, looks like a Colgate model. He's got the shiniest teeth, and I think that was a part of the plan. I was getting blinded in the
just reflecting off the lights coming down from the roof and everything. That's a foreign object tactic if I've ever seen one.
I thought Suman was shooting a Colgate ad at cage side. They are some of the best teeth in the business now. Suman, shout out to whoever your dentist is. When I come down to Eternal in Sydney, please take me out to him. I need some of those teeth. They are the best. Yeah, it's Josh Togo. He's, people forget how good he is. You know what I mean? It's sort of out of sight, out of mind. People forget that guy was a champion. People forget how long he's been around for. He's very, very good. He's very tough. He trains in a good team, good skills. And look, in this occasion, like I said, it was a very good game plan. And I agree, he ran away in the second half of that fight with the boxing. That long rangey strikes, Jack was right again, like we spoke about before. He wasn't outside and he wasn't inside. He was right where Josh wanted him to be, which was right at the end of those strikes. And that's where he was getting hit. Sort
of leaning forward. His face is always just sort of there, kind of lurching forward, just kind of just sort of letting him kind of just using that sort of range, that sort of thing, and just sort of peppering off him a little bit.
And he was unable to counter because he, like I said, he just wasn't at that range where he could counter. He ran out of a bit of steam there in the end, which is, again, for Jack Becker, he, not something we're necessarily used to seeing. Jack's usually comes with a gas tank to do it all and then some. So, I think it's a combination of two things. Josh, great night, great performance, great game plan. Jack Becker, maybe just a little bit off on the night, just not looking like the Jack Becker of old. And, look, I guess it's up for him now to sort of look and see what he wants to do in this space. Is this really what he wants to do? Does he want to keep fighting? Is he, you know what I mean? Is this what he wants? And now I think he's 1-2 in his last 3 fights. Is that right?
Yeah, I mean, he won his last fight, after, he lost those returning 2 fights, got that win back that he needed to sort of grind out in the last one before he got back into this one.
So it's, I guess that dream that was right in front of him of the UFC, like he was going.
Yeah.
This was already decided.
Yeah.
He was going.
Preconceived.
And now that dream's the light of that dream starting to get a bit dim, getting a bit darker. So I'd imagine it's hard mentally to go from the lofty heights and the hype and everything to a complete rehab program, back in the cage, get a couple of losses. And you know what I mean? It sort of puts you further away from that dream that was so close to your grasp. And I wonder what that does to you mentally, because again, I just felt like a Jack Becker of old would have found a way in that fight, at least a way to change his strategy in the latter half of that fight and not sort of let himself continuously get hit like he was.
Yeah, I mean, you see that from like so many athletes, in sports that aren't necessarily contact sports, that come back from things like that aren't as devastating as a leg break to, the middle of your shin bone. I mean, guys that are basketball players, come back from like, Achilles injuries and that sort of thing and are just never the same. I don't know if this is what the case is as far as Jack goes, because we've seen like MMA fighters and that sort of thing come back from leg injuries and that sort of thing and have some sort of success. But I mean, you can even look at guys like Chris Weidman, had something very sort of similar and just not quite sort of the same anymore. No.
Anderson Silva was never the same. We haven't seen Conor since he did his leg. So it's
like how much of it's mental. Like you don't know. Yeah. You can't tell. Like you don't know if it's just like, some fighters will come in, bones are all healthy, everything's good upstairs, but you just don't fire on the night, like for whatever reason. You hear that sort of so much. So I guess we'll never know, like, what sort of the main factor was there. Maybe it was just Josh Togo had the right game plan, you know what I mean? Like, we can't take it away from Josh. That was the first time we saw him back in the Eternal MMA cage, I think, since he originally lost that belt. Back at, I can't remember which Eternal card that was, but it was the first time we saw him back here. So cool to see him back in that win column. I mean, we got to go back to, I think, he won that title against David Martinez, the first guy to beat David Martinez, went on to defend the title against Ben Wall at Eternal 52. Like we said, went on to lose that at Eternal, I can't remember the actual card it was, but against Dan Hill. And then sort of that storyline continues with Jack Becker eventually winning that off Dan Hill. And now we're sort of here with those two guys clashing some cards later. So hopefully we sort of see Jack get to come back and return to some kind of form. If it's something sort of mentally, I mean, I'm not going to pretend to understand what that's like, trying to come back from an injury like that and trying to come back and be a professional mixed martial arts fighter and get wins all in the process. But Josh Togo puts his hand back up, I think, after the fight. Said that he'd be happy to come in for another lightweight title shot. We don't know what Quillan Solkild's doing going forward. Maybe we don't see Quillan here again, but happy to have Josh Togo back in the win column for Eternal MMA. And maybe we see him fighting for a title potentially sometime soon with one of the cards that we'll have coming up this year. I'd like to see that.
Yeah, look, he's a good fighter and he's fun to watch. And yeah, look, I don't know if we'll see Quillan again. And if not, I'd love to see Togo versus anyone really. Like, I mean, there's a bunch. Look, Togo versus Dom Marfan. I mean, I think Dom's the heir to that title. Like, Dom is a champion in any fight promotion that doesn't have Quillan Solkild in it.
I'm going straight to the selfishness and just wishing that if we had seen Wes Kappa being able to make lightweight, like, oh my God, we could have got like a Wes Kappa versus like Josh Togo fight. Like, man, that would have been sick. But yes, like Dom's obviously still in that picture for sure.
Yeah, I think, and going forward, I think we need to talk to the commission about doing something about Suman's teeth. I really think that also may have put Jack off.
That's not fair.
They're fantastic teeth, brother. And when I'm down there in Sydney, please hook me up with your dentist. I need a bit of that shine.
Hook Darryl up with your guy, man, whoever that might be, because yes, I did make note of that. That was some pearly whites for sure. So a little bit too white. I don't know. Like you gotta wear them in a little bit, but they were looking good. So shout out to that man, Cage side for sure. But what else did we have? We had a couple of title fights just after this. Of course, we had Anthony Drillich defending his title for the very first time. Drillich, we had Satoru Inamoto coming over from Japan to put on a show here as we were sort of struggling to get Drillich an opponent there. Looked fantastic. Obviously got the job done in the second round. Man, the power on Anthony Drilic. Obviously got the KO of the night because there's not too many guys walking around at flyweight that carry the power of Anthony Drilic. But, I mean, you got to remember that Anthony Drilic came down from, I think, beginning his career as a pro up at featherweight. I think, I could be wrong on this, but I swear he said he's fought at some point at lightweight. I could be getting confused with someone else. At any rate, he's brought that power down from featherweight, fought a couple of times at bantamweight, fought his debut at flyweight for that vacant title. Of course, Stephen Erceg vacated the title. Stephen Erceg, of course, fighting at UFC 301, fighting for the flyweight championship in the UFC. But what a worthy heir to the throne is Anthony Drilic, putting away Saturo in that second round. It looked like that left to sort of glance his chin. Didn't look like it caught him absolutely flush, but it caught him well enough that it dropped him. I thought initially just off that first part that it was a potential early stoppage because he was still sort of rolling around there, but looking back, and I mean, he hit the ground. The arms went back straight away. He didn't defend himself well enough when Anthony ultimately jumped on him with the hammer fist. But, I mean, he rolls on, goes to 7-1 as a pro now. He's calling his shot. I'd like to see him stick around and just, maybe defend it at least one more time here because I'd like to see just a little bit more of him. But we've got something in our hands in Anthony Drilic there. Of course, Scrappy MMA product from over there in Perth doing good things. But, man, that power. Scary power for a flyweight man.
Yeah, look, and he got the job done with a big shot and finished him with some hammer strikes. But it was a very, very unorthodox opponent in Enomoto. He was
showboating
down.
Yeah,
he was touching the ground, hands down, hands up.
Yeah.
Look, I always think those sort of fighters are an X factor because it's just so bizarre and it's so obscure fighting those guys, the range, the timing. He's touching the ground, he's up, his hands down, he's in your face. And look, he's got one of the stronger chins in the game. In the chin game, he runs a serious chin. And, the fact that he hit that chin and knocked him out was knocked him down at least. And look, I spoke to Cam afterwards, and if you watch that replay, you're right, it was only a glancing shot, and he's probably lucky because Drilic put it all into that shot, and if he had copped it, he probably would still be there. They'd be sweeping up the Southport Sharks, and Enomoto would still be on the floor. But, good shot, good follow-up, good hammer fist. But, yeah, look, I think it's good for Drilic to get just a strange, just a weird, different opponent. I saw his corner were wearing Pancrase pals and stuff, and I'm assuming that maybe he has a Pancrase background.
He's a former Pancrase champion.
Okay, there you go. I didn't know that about him, but yeah, look, he was very awkward and very unorthodox, and like I said, his kicks were good. He threw some heavy high kicks, and it's all those things when you have somebody so unorthodox and a punch or a kick or a weird knee or something just comes that you're not used to seeing in your sparring sessions, you haven't seen in your other fights, and that's how you end up getting hit from something you're not used to, and next thing you know, again, you're waking up watching the other guy's hand getting raised. So I thought Drilic did a good job, and I could hear Ben Vickers and the boys from Scrappy. Again, the corner work is so important these days. Listening to your corner, the corner's seeing more than what you're seeing because you're trying to concentrate, but you're not seeing all the setups, the footwork, the things that your opponent's trying to do, where when you don't have that adrenaline pumping and you can sort of take a 10,000-foot view of everything that's going on, you can log all these things and start giving instruction to the fighter. And you could see Drilic on the fly taking on board what the boys from Scrappy MMA were saying. So that was something I really saw that I thought was fantastic. I was like, okay, he changed that. Okay, he's now circling out that side. Okay, yeah, he's getting in or out of that range. And I just thought he did a really good job listening to his corner, and obviously it paid dividends. And look, when you've got that much power, that when you just brush the jaw and you get that reaction, that's the eraser. You can make a few mistakes, and that left hand of his can erase all the mistakes. Not that he made mistakes on the night. I'm just saying going forward.
Yeah.
If you ever make mistakes, that's the type of punch that can erase any mistakes you make on a night.
I think it's something that would have to help him, I guess, with his patience, because it's such an equalizer that he has with that power that, he can kind of afford to, I guess, just go sit back and kind of, see where the fight's sort of playing out, because no matter, what someone else is doing on the other side of the cage with their hands down and sort of picking their shots and that sort of thing, he can feel the fight out and just go, listen, if all else fails, because I can back it up with one of these, he's going to put his lights out pretty much straight away. And ultimately that's what we saw, just that one sort of devastating shot down the middle. It's a good thing for him to have in his back pocket.
Well, you could see throughout the fight, if you go back and watch it, he threw that hard left hand a few times.
Yeah.
But he just slowly but surely shortened the distance. He missed it a few times. And once he shortened it up, and again, when he threw it, it wasn't perfect. It wasn't quite there, but you could see that shot, he'd slowly shorten the distance, worked out where he wanted to throw it, worked out the head movement on Enomoto, and you saw him throw it sort of straight and across the time before, and this time was more straight down the pipe, and he'd sort of shortened that distance up. And look, I think if it wasn't that one, and Enomoto, like I said before, was probably lucky that he got the glancing shot, and then obviously, unfortunately for him, got finished on the ground with the hammers. But I think the next one or two of those left hands that he threw, he really had Enomoto's number, knew where the head was going to be, and I think if it wasn't that shot, it was going to be another left hand that got him, and it would have been a more flush one because you could see the calculations going on. Okay, no, missed him there. I need to just shorten that distance up a fraction. Okay, when I'm throwing, he's moving here. Okay, I'm going to move him that way with my shot, step in, bang. And like I said, he just glanced him, but you could see the correction that he'd made through the fight to get that shot to land on that instance.
No, for Anthony Drillich, that caps a 5-fight win streak for him now. Obviously, he captured that title but it was the vacant flyweight title against Frank Jankowski back at Eternal 80. But we got to go all the way back to 2018 when we last saw Anthony Drillich have a loss. It was his one single loss that he has in his record. That was against Michael Manu in a decision. But, he was one of those guys that he fought on some of those earlier Eternal cards too, like made his promotional debut at Eternal 25. Won that fight by KO, went on to Eternal 28, won by submission there. Had that loss after that at Eternal 34 against Michael Manu, but then went through, Lawrence Louis, Michael Barber, Jamie Renouf, Frank Jankowski, or Frank Jankowski, depending on how you want to pronounce it, for that vacant flyweight title, and now gets the job done in spectacular fashion against Satoru Enomoto to defend that for the first time and get himself a Performance of the Night bonus along the way. Like I said, he's calling his shot for the UFC. Depending on what we got here for this flyweight division in this country, I'd love to see him still have another fight here. But, he's certainly showing good things. Said he wants to carve his own path. He was asked after the fight, are you following in the footsteps of a guy like Steven Erceg? What a path to follow there. But, to his credit, he said he's forging his own path. Wants to follow his own path, but I tell you what, good lineage for that flyweight title for Eternal MMA. Potentially we're going to have a couple of Australian flyweights tearing up the UFC division sooner rather than later.
But there's a little tale of caution here that I think some people aren't seeing. So I understand everybody wants to go to the UFC. That's a childhood dream. I get it. You want to go to the big show. I get it. But Justin Van Heiden, after he won, is he, 9 months on the sideline now? 9 months without a fight, 10 months without a fight, and we're still not at the UFC. Now, how long does that go? How long are you outside the cage? I get it. Like, everyone wants to go to the UFC, but don't cut your nose off to spite your face. Don't say, well, I can only fight in the UFC. I only want to, because the reality is, if you can't win fights here in Australia, you are not going to win fights in the UFC. If you can't beat the crop of talent we have here, there's a fair chance you're going to struggle when you get to the upper echelons of the sport. So I understand everybody wants to go and they keep calling their shots to go. But I'm saying in the event that it's not straight away, I'm not going to fight. I'm just going to hold out.
Stay busy
until
here.
I get to the UFC.
Yeah.
Well, like I said, Justin Van Heiden, that's 9-10 months. There's not even a fight announcement. So what are we going to go? 12 months, 14 months, 16 months? He was on such a hot streak. His name was on everybody's lips. And just like, this is probably one of the first times I've talked about him, or we've mentioned him in the podcast sort of in that light for a bit. And I just, like I said, it's not a slight on them. I understand what they're doing. I understand what they want to do. But sometimes I just wonder, we've seen what ring rust has done to so many fighters. We've seen what inactivity has done to so many fighters. Your dream to fight in the UFC is one thing, but your ability to stay consistent, stay in the cage and stay active is more likely to see that dream fulfilled than a long spell on the sideline because you've decided, I'm just doing UFC now. I'm UFC. So I think if the opportunity comes up for Drilic, and if the opportunity comes up for some of these other guys who are reputedly UFC bound, I'd like to see them take that opportunity. If they don't have a fight in the pipeline, if the management isn't already talking and solid on paper stuff has been done with the UFC, take a fight. Stay active. If you're good enough, you will be good enough. You will stay good enough. You're not going to, the only way you go backwards is these long breaks on the sideline, these long spells trying to wait for your moment in the UFC. Like, I'm not sure exactly when the Contender Series starts, but is it August, September?
I can't remember, but they do it very seasonally, that sort of thing, don't they? I can't remember exactly when it kicks off.
So we're March now. So let's just say March, April, May, June, July, August. So what are you talking? 5, potentially 6 more months now. If you've already been on the sideline for 9, 10 months, so you're 16 months without a fight. You're pushing towards a year and a half without getting in the cage, and then they put you in there with some of the best in the world. Hey, I hope, as an Australian fan, as a fight fan, as a fan of Justin Van Heiden, as a fan of all these guys, I hope it works out for them, and I want to see them all fulfill their dreams. But playing devil's advocate, I just don't know whether that's always the right idea to say, well, I've won a belt. I'm UFC guy now. I just don't necessarily know if that's the right strategy. Why not take a fight? If you're good enough, you're good enough. You'll beat the local talent if you're good enough. Stay active, stay busy. And I think that's things that the UFC and stuff want to see. I think UFC want to see active fighters. I don't know if the UFC want to say, coming into the ring is John Smith, who fought in 1847. I think they want current content, current fights, and stuff like that. Now, I'm just an analyst. I'm just saying what I think. There might be stuff in the background that I don't know about, and I'm just talking out my ass. I don't know. But I'm just saying, from my perspective and from what I understand, that there's nothing on paper here for anything yet that I'm aware of. And it's all what everybody wants to happen, but nothing's quite on paper yet. So, again, for Drilic and for some of these other guys, if it's not on paper and you don't have a clear path and nothing's set in stone, would it harm you to solidify your legacy here, to put another fight on paper, to show the UFC, again, you are the man? I don't know. I'm not management. I'm not these guys. So,
yeah, I mean, I've had Anthony on the pod before, and I've never gotten the impression from Anthony or anything like that he's certainly wanted just to put his hand up and say, no, it's UFC or bust or anything like that. Like, he's definitely got his head screwed on the right way. Seems like he would sort of take all comers. I mean, I think at that moment, you're riding the wave. You just got a massive big time win. The camera's in your face, being asked, do we see you in the UFC sometime soon? You can forgive these guys for wanting to sort of call their shots. If it happens, fantastic. But, I certainly don't think that Anthony Drilic is the kind of guy to rest on his laurels. I think, if they come and put a fight in front of him, tomorrow, and it's Eternal MMA, and there's nothing necessary on the horizon for the UFC, I think he's got the belief and he's got the power and he's got the skills that he can say, hey, line him up, because I'll just keep knocking him down until, the UFC comes calling. And, obviously he's a fan of these guys, and, that's what we're doing here. I mean, we want to promote these guys to get the most out of their career here, and then, see them off to go on to bigger and better things. That's the dream, right? Like, that's everything why we're doing this. That's why I do this. We'd selfishly like to see everyone stick around in Eternal MMA forever because we get to see them here locally. But of course, the big dream is to see these guys go on and do, big things internationally, and we get to cheer them on from the other side of the pond there. So for whatever comes next for Anthony, looking forward to seeing that power back in the cage, man. Be it here, be it overseas. Again, love to see it here again, depending on what sort of happens on one of the cards coming forward. But I know he's going to be back in there ready to go whenever that is, because he's certainly in a good bit of health, because he didn't take too much damage from that fight. Got the job done in spectacular fashion. Won himself a bonus from Fight HQ in the process. And he'll move on to the next one. But that was the fight before the big one, the one we're all there to see, which was John Martin Fraser coming in to defend his title. The title that he won from Brogan Anderson in spectacular fashion in round one back at Eternal 81. After he originally lost that from Matt Myers back at Eternal 72. So John Martin Fraser back on top where he belongs, but coming in against Ben Johnston, of course. Ben Johnston, the former Muay Thai world champion. Very young in the game still as far as his mixed martial arts career, albeit not in life. But, I mean, came in and got the job done just in crazy fashion with that choke in the second round. Just sort of came out of nowhere. I mean, for a former Muay Thai world champion, now with 4, I think, submissions on his record now with 1 TKO win. This is pretty wild stuff. I spoke to him on the podcast before he came into this fight. He said himself it doesn't really matter. It doesn't matter to him how he gets these fights done. In fact, I think he's enjoying this part of his game because, you know, he's been a Muay Thai guy for all these years. He's happy with doing the grappling. He's happy with the jiu-jitsu. He's happy sort of mixing it up. That's why he's doing this. He's an MMA fighter. But, I mean, this fight on paper coming in just had it all. I mean, 100% success rate from a finishing perspective for Ben Johnston. All but 1, I believe, for John Martin Fraser coming in by the way finish. And I mean, these guys too, both of them. I mean, hard guys to finish in their own right. Ben being finished just the one time for his one loss. Ditto for John Martin Fraser, only being finished one time in his career as well. So, we talked about this before the fight to both these guys. You could kind of forgive yourself for thinking, man, is this fight going to end in the first round because these guys have got crazy finishing ability? Is this fight going to go the 5 rounds because, these guys have got fantastic staying ability? Ultimately, it was Ben Johnston taking the title from John Martin Fraser. Called his shot, obviously, after the fight. But, I mean, that crowd was rocking for Ben. You were there. That was loud, man. I know we talk about a lot of loud crowds, but that's the loudest I've personally heard Southport Sharks. He's a big personality up there on the Gold Coast, up there in Queensland, I should say, rather. Obviously, with his gym up there at the Fight Centre. Trained with John Jones recently. Maybe that was sort of the lucky rabbit's foot in there for that fight to come out on top. But hats off to Ben Johnston, man. I mean, what a way to start your MMA career. Now, I believe it's 5-1 as a professional now. Middleweight title around your waist. He's looking to charge forward. Doesn't have a ton of time left in MMA given his age. But, for someone still so young in this game of MMA, I mean, he set himself pretty nicely. That was an incredible win. Very unorthodox way to finish the fight too.
Yeah, look, what did I say to you 6-7 podcasts ago when we talked about Ben Johnston? He might not lie about his grappling, but he might just not tell the truth about it either. And
Yeah.
I think at some stage people are going to have to start waking up and having a look at. I think he's 30-3 as a Muay Thai fighter, and I think that's a lot of what people see. But as an MMA fighter, he's 5-1 with 4 submission finishes.
That's friggin' wild, man. Yeah.
And of those 4 submission finishes, I believe 3 are the same choke.
Yeah, they are.
It's all. He did Emil with it, John with it, and he did. I think his pro MMA debut. He finished a guy with this same choke. So it's something. It's obviously he works on a lot. It's something that he's comfortable in trying to apply. In terms of the crowd, man, you say the TFC crowd, 100%, they were the loudest, and that was the loudest crowd. But we were sitting over, and there was no shortage of John Martin Fraser fans. Like, we were sitting right next to them, and it was popping off.
Yeah.
It was super loud, so much support there. And like I said, I was nervous. I was sitting next to Min, who did some commentary early on in the prelims, and we were talking about how nervous we were for this fight. The hands and the power and the ferocity of John Martin Fraser, and then the precision and sniper-like ability of Ben Johnston, coupled with that grappling pedigree. Like, I think people forget. And I think it's because he's not really massive on social media, but he's gold medaled at a lot of jiu-jitsu tournaments. He's gone and got gold medals. And I think this is all blown under the radar. And I said in the other podcast, back in the day when I was working at Southside MMA, there was this young, lanky Muay Thai kid that would sneak in at lunchtime and do a lunchtime class. Who's this kid? He's a Muay Thai guy. Just wants to know some BJJ. You know what I mean? And then literally what it was. No one else knew, and he was sneaking in the back door, doing a class, off he'd go again. I never thought anything of it. Advanced 10 years, here he is, submitting people,
Wow.
submitting guys like John Martin Fraser. And like I said, that was a an even fight right up till it wasn't. And if I'm being honest, John won that first round. I don't think
John looked good,
doubt.
man. Like, John looked as sharp as ever, man. Like, he looked good. Like, the strikes were on point, man. He got those takedowns. Like, he looked like he was in control.
Look, I think if you were to look at those cards, I didn't get a chance to look at those ones in particular.
Had
but
to
I would
won the first
imagine
round.
across the board, all judges would have given that first round. His takedowns, his timing on those takedowns were exquisite.
So good.
The way he threw them, the way that he shot them right at the right time. And yeah, look, it was the one thing that he did do that, this is just me, just a personal pet peeve of mine. Ever since Habib started mermaiding people's legs, crossing his legs, and now everybody does it. Now, and he did it. What people don't understand is Habib's limb length, the millions of repetitions that he's done on that, the way he does it, what he does with his hands when he does it. It's all something, a system that he's produced when he ties up your legs with his legs and immobilizes you. There's a whole system that Habib's got that does it. And ever since he started doing it and having success with it, I see a lot of these fighters doing it. And I saw John do it. You'll see him in that fight when he took him down. He mermaid that, what I call mermaiding legs. He puts the legs underneath and picks on, mermaids those legs. But Ben just found a hip and pulled his leg out straight away. And I think that happens because you haven't put in those million reps. You don't have the same limb length, the same grip strength, the same reps, and the millions of times that he's done this, and the way that he pressures into those knees and into those hips, and the grip that he used and the way he immobilized. Like I said, there's so much nuance that goes into that position from Habib. But now it's like I don't want to say a fanboy thing because I think that's unfair, but it's a thing that I'm seeing so many people try to, even in the level of the UFC, but nobody's doing it and nobody's executing it and nobody's getting the success that Habib got with it. And a lot of the time, people are abandoning otherwise dominant positions or positions they're more familiar with to try and mermaid these legs. And when he did take Ben down, he did mermaid the legs. Ben got to a hip and pulled his leg straight out, and it was reasonably ineffective, where I think maybe a more traditional, more strategic approach to the ground may have benefited him more in that situation. But with that said, hit the takedowns, hit Ben with some good shots. Both of them exchanged some heavy, heavy shots. Ben threw a couple of really big elbows that didn't land. John threw a couple of good rights, one that obviously took a chip out of Ben's face, some good kicks. I thought his distance was really good. And like you said, right up until it didn't, John looked in control. He looked calm. He looked like the game plan was going the way he wanted it to go. He wasn't struggling in any facet of the game. But yeah, just that sneaky choke that Ben throws in. And if you go back and have a look at that finishing sequence, Ben actually tries it and John sort of slips past it and gets his back. And Ben frames out, makes space, and comes back around, squares off to him, and this time gets the choke. And I'm not 100% sure that John's seen that choke before, because as it was being applied, John made no movement. And I don't think he thought he was in any danger, because when Ben did cinch that up, you saw that quick, sharp movement of John and then stop. And it almost froze him in time. And it was like, when he felt the squeeze, I'm in trouble, move, it was too late. It was already in. It was already locked. And with those, you see those long ass arms of Ben Johnson, it cinches up so tight. And Ben told me, he said he gets this choke in training a lot. And he said John held out in that choke a lot longer than a lot of people do, because he said, I had that deep. He said, I had it tight. He said, I had the angle. He said, I had everything that I wanted to have that choke. Went perfect in that moment. And he said, John really held out a lot longer than he expected. Because he said a lot of the time it's so hard because there's a lot of blade on the throat. And he said a lot of the time that pressure, that angle, and that sort of squeeze, and he has a very, very strong squeeze, gets a lot of people to tap quite quickly. So, yeah, it's sort of like I said, it was a lot of John Martin Fraser doing a lot of good things and a lot of things going John's way right up to the point where it wasn't. So, it's a bit of a pill to swallow when you were, like I said, good distance, good striking, good takedowns, good control. You were doing all the things that you needed to do to win that fight. And just like I said, it's that, he's a very cagey, wily, foxy character is Ben Johnson. And just, you know what I mean? It's just that moment in time where those long arms are there. And before you know it, the danger's on and there's no way out.
This is sort of a bit of a getting off the beaten path type thing, but it's one guy that I sort of think about in a moment like this is Caleb Rideout. Because Caleb Rideout is the guy that beat Ben Johnston, for his only professional loss. Ben, and obviously we just talked about guys calling their shot for the UFC and all that sort of thing. I think someone like Ben, who's got that credential Muay Thai background and that sort of thing, maybe he sort of got that shot even with his inexperience as a mixed martial artist. But, I mean, he's got the lone win over Ben Johnston. He's also got a win over Kevin Jousset, who's in the UFC and everything now as well. Like, he's fought a couple of these guys. I've talked to Caleb on the podcast before, just talking about, when you see these guys in UFC, and do you think a bit about that could sort of be you? I mean, add another name to the list that we could potentially see in the UFC sometime soon, in Ben Johnston, that, someone you've kind of constantly beaten. Like, that's just sort of a random sort of thought I had there, that these guys you sort of beaten left, right, and center are sort of getting out ahead of you. That's just the name of the game in MMA. Sometimes it's just MMA math and just making the most of the opportunities when they get presented to you.
Well, that's right. It's all about the opportunities and taking those opportunities when they're in front of you. Caleb Rideout, fantastic fighter, and yeah, he does have the lone win over Ben Johnson.
Down at welterweight, by the way. Like, I know
welterweight.
I know Ben's not like he's a taller, like lanky kind of guy, but it's crazy to me when I see him at 6'4". It looked a little bit taller than John Jones, mind you, and he pointed that out when he was on the podcast. And he's like, I don't know if John lies about his height, but he's like, I felt like I was a little bit taller than John Jones. And like, this dude was like going down to welterweight to fight. Like, Ben's a tall, big sort of guy. You know what I mean? Like, it's crazy to me that he was doing that weight cut.
Well, I've got to assume that with Ben, all the weights above the waist, and there's lack of weight below the waist potentially. I don't know,
There's no way he
exactly
watches this far into the podcast. He watches it this far at all. So, it's okay. I think we're safe in this space here, unless he's going to skip to the end to see if we're talking about him.
Yeah, I'm not sure. But yeah, look, the fact that he made welterweight is completely crackers. But in saying that, I think, obviously you see he's he's a big character. He's a big guy. I think it probably did a lot to him. And I'm not taking away from anything from Caleb Rideout. Fantastic performance. Ben turns up and competes every time. But I think you have a look at that performance and then you have a look at his middleweight performances. It's, at middleweight, he's been unstoppable. Welterweight, stoppable. Middleweight,
Not so
unstoppable.
much.
And I think it's a much more natural weight for him. I think, and he tells me he doesn't do massive weight cuts, which, again, like I always say, sometimes
He's a
that
pretty
Robert
lean
Whittaker,
guy anyway. Like, yeah.
Yeah, I think that Robert Whittaker idea of, hey, fight a little bit more naturally, because like, look at Robert Whittaker.
Yeah.
Same thing. Welterweight,
Especially older. Yeah.
had some struggles. Went to middleweight, became the champion of the world.
Yep.
I think Ben Johnson, I think what a lot of people don't see about Ben is, and I say this all the time, and with a degree of affection, he's a fight geek, a fight nerd. Like, I don't think people understand the thought that he puts into fighting. Whenever possible, I try to pick his brains about his process, about the things he does, because he's a very considered person. He does all the, the post-fight, my heterosexual partner for life.
Yeah, that was a
Jarvi,
great moment.
fantastic piece of post-fight chat. And, he's the Logan kid. He's the Logan boy, born and bred, and
The working class man.
Yeah, and he is a working class man. He's reps Logan. He never tries to shy away from his roots. But in that, I think people get lost and don't realize this guy spends a lot of time thinking about moves, working moves, considering things, watching tape, watching things. He's a much bigger fight geek, fight nerd than people can really understand. And like I said, anytime I do get the opportunity to speak to Ben, I do it because every time I walk away from it going, how is this Muay Thai guy, MMA guy, punches and gets punched for a living, have a brain that works like that's so intricate in terms of, it's not, a lot of it's really, how do I say it, refining things down to, like I said, an art. He's not trying to brute anything. The more simple and the more precise he can make something, the better. And those guys there at TFC are always trying to refine it and get it down. And obviously with Ben at the helm, and we see this with this choke. Like I said, this is the third time that he's caught professional MMA guys with this choke. And John Martin Fraser, for my money, was the guy to beat Ben Johnson. I haven't made it a secret. I tell everyone Ben's a friend of mine, but I tell everyone John Martin Fraser was the man to beat Ben Johnson. But Ben, again...
Well, he acknowledged that himself. He said, like on the pod, that this is the man for him to beat. Like, like saying this is the guy I've got to beat. So, that's the sort of the tip that, John's sort of, potentially be favoured to get the win.
Yeah, look, like I said, but it was a good fight. And again, great for the crowd. It was when he stood up smiling and took the mouthpiece out and there was drinks going in the air and people cheering and the TFC chant went up and, everyone, and I kind of was looking around. I was trying to look up and I couldn't see the screen because there's people jumping in front of me and TFC guys tackling me. And I'm sort of like, okay, everyone stop. I don't know what happened. I could see something happen against the cage. And even on the replay,
it happened so quick, yeah.
On the replay, it was on the dark side of the moon. It was hard to see exactly. So I called Ben today just before the podcast to actually say, hey, man, can you just walk me through that just so I understand what happened? And he said, hey, just go back and look at my fight against Emil. It's the same choke, but you just see it better in the fight against Emil. And once I went back and had a look at that, and then I saw an Instagram clip of the fight, I'm like, hey, this is this same choke again. And this is the third time he's got a professional guy with this choke. And it's that, I think it's that cagey, wily, coyote character that he is of nothing's happening. And all of a sudden, before you know it, he's got you. And you never saw it coming, which I don't think John did. And you could tell that from his reaction, that quick, oh, shit, I'm in trouble. And I'm deep, I'm done. And even to the point of, if you listen to Ben's post-fight interview, when he talked about being taken down by John, he said that he didn't necessarily want to blow his wad trying to get off the ground, because he said John was actually controlling him quite well and doing a lot of the really good things. And he said he was impressed by what John did, and he didn't want to use heaps of energy when John was controlling him so well. He said, I looked up, I saw there wasn't much time left in the round. I'm happy to let him have this round and not use a whole bunch of energy to get out of a position that I don't see a clear path of escape from. And to have that cognitive ability in a fight to, okay, 30 seconds, I'm happy to lose a round. I'm not going to try and extend myself beyond what I need to. I'll let him have that one. Round two is another round. We'll come back and do it all again.
No, and do it all again. He did. Came out as the middleweight champion for Eternal MMA. Just cracking performance. Again, just some wild shit, especially with that technique from a guy that's supposed to be a Muay Thai world champion. To pull that out against a beast like John Martin Fraser, as quick as he did in that position, I mean, that's some stuff you don't sort of see every day from a guy that's, not sort of that far removed from being a striking specialist and coming in, like you said, 3 times, locking in that same choke, that kind of gangster shit of saying, hey, go back and have a look at that fight that I had against Emil Jerry's, and I pulled out the exact sort of same thing. And I just want to touch on very quickly. You talk about him being sort of a fight nerd. I heard him talk recently. I can't remember who or, what the sort of the context was, but he was talking about whoever was asking about, him teaching at the fight center. And, does that take away from you being able to train yourself and like your fight camps and that sort of thing? And he said something to the effect of like, hey, me teaching these guys, gives me, sort of what I need to be able to put into these fights, because he's like, I get so much perspective from training these guys. So does it take away from me being able to do my own training camps? No, it feeds into it. Like, I get to help these guys. I love it. And I take something from these guys. It's not him putting his hand up and saying, hey, I'm the big dog at the top. I'm teaching everyone here. I'm the master. He's like, I'm learning from everyone. I'm teaching them, but I'm getting so much sort of back. So, he's a nerd mind in the sport, but he's also a giver to the sport, and the sport gives back to him. So, very cool to see him with the middleweight strap around his waist. We'll see John Martin Fraser back, of course. He's an absolute gangster himself. He's an Eternal MMA man, but we got a cracking fight. We've got a big-time crowd. We've got a big-time buzz for Eternal 83, and what a way to cap it off with that win. What do we move on to now? We're Eternal 84. Coming up, I believe it is, we're back at Liberty Hall in Sydney. Coming up in May, I think it is, on a Friday night. I think it's May 24. We got Liberty Hall. There's only been a couple of fights announced for that card. No main event at this stage, but a couple of prelim fights or a couple of, not title fights have been announced at this stage, but that's something to look forward to back at the Liberty Hall, that fun little venue that we went to that one time back before the last Sydney card we had there. May 24, get your tickets. They're on sale already at eternalmma.com. Of course, we've got Steven Erceg coming up for that fight for the flyweight title against Alessandro Pantoja. So big up to Steven Erceg. 4 fights in UFC already coming in for a title fight. A lot of people saying who. Well, we're just about to find out who, or the rest of the world's about to find out who, because we already know who. So big shout out to Steven Erceg. Hopefully we see Steven back on the pod to talk about that fight. But either way, can't wait to see Steven go in there and do what he does over there in that hostile crowd of Brazil. But we'll do this all again, man. When we've got that next card coming up, no doubt we'll talk about the fights coming up. I can't wait to see what's going to get announced for that one. Curious to see what's potentially coming. I don't know anything, but it's on a Friday night, which is quite unusual. What we've normally seen from Friday nights for Eternal MMA cards, usually something follows on a Saturday. So I'm curious to see what potentially comes out of that. I could be reading too much into that as far as UFC perspective goes, but we'll see what happens there come May. I know obviously we've got the Perth cards potentially coming up, what the rumors are in August or something like that. But I'm personally just wondering if this is happening on a Friday night for a particular reason.
Well, look, if history were to repeat itself, for example, I would say, look, a Friday night card does tell us potentially something. So, look, although we have no confirmation of such a thing, it's... And
I don't. I genuinely don't. We're not playing smoke and mirrors here. I don't. I'm just saying, I was like, a Friday night card. It's interesting. Last time we had a Friday night card in Sydney, we had something follow the next day in the form of UFC. So, I don't know. We'll see.
But, look, great card in 83. Another great card coming up in 84. Fantastic to be back in Sydney. Good to see Sydney fighters get a chance to fight in front of their crowd, because obviously that home crowd does make a big difference, and that ability to cut weight and do things in your hometown, get your people to turn up. It's great that Cam's taken it down there for them. We're getting a lot of support from the Sydney gyms, so it's good for us to give back to them. Go and put a card on in their hometown.
Eternal MMA is on fire. Australian MMA is on fire. Darryl, thanks for doing this one with me again, man. Always love doing the breakdowns. Always like doing the previews, and we will preview, albeit a couple of months away for Eternal 84, but very much looking forward to that. Until next time, man, thank you very much, and we will see you in the next one.
Be good.